Isabella Romano sat in the huge living room of her family's enormous mansion. Her hands were tight fists. She was listening to her father, Mr. Carlos Romano, talk. His voice was deep and powerful. It filled the whole room. Isabella, you are getting older now. It is time for you to marry a good man. I have already talked to Richard's family. They agree that you two should get married. He comes from a wealthy family. Together, you will make the Romano name even stronger. Isabella's heart was beating fast with anger. This was always the same conversation. Marry a rich man, protect the family money, make the Romano name more important. Never about love, never about what she wanted. "Dad, I don't need you to choose a husband for me," she said. Her voice was shaking, but she tried to stay calm. "I already have someone I love. I'm already in a serious relationship." Her mother, Mrs. Elena Romano, had been sitting quietly next to her father. She slowly put down her teacup. Her face showed nothing, but Isabella could feel her mother staring at her hard. Her father stayed still. He just looked at her. "Really? Then bring him here. I want to meet this man who has stolen my daughter's heart. If he is serious about you, he should be ready to face me." Isabella's stomach twisted with fear. She thought her father would argue with her, but not this fast. If she didn't bring someone soon, her father would think she was lying. "Fine," she said, trying to sound confident even though she was nervous inside. "I'll bring him." Mr. Romano nodded, looking satisfied. "Good. Bring him tomorrow night. Let's see if he is good enough for you." Isabella quickly stood up. Her heart was racing. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus Tate. He picked up after a few rings. "Babe, I need to see you right now. It's important," she said urgently. "Relax, Isabella. What's the rush?" he replied. His voice sounded lazy and uncaring. "It's my dad. He wants to meet you. I told him we're serious and he expects to see you tomorrow night." There was a long silence. Then she heard him sigh. "Isabella, tomorrow is really tough for me. I'll be working late. You know how things are." Her stomach dropped. "Marcus, this is important. Can't you make time?" "Babe, I can't. Let's talk later, okay? I'll call you when I'm free." Isabella clenched her teeth. She was tired of excuses. Marcus always seemed to have an important meeting, a last-minute trip, or something that conveniently kept him from meeting her family. "Fine," she snapped before hanging up. Still angry, she stormed out of her father's house and into her car. She was not in the mood to argue anymore. "If he won't come to me, then I'll go to him," she muttered. She drove straight to Marcus's house. If he was too busy to see her, then she would wait for him to get back from work. She needed to make sure he understood just how serious this was. She pulled up to Marcus's house. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel tightly. The street was quiet. Only the dim glow of the porch light lit up the entrance. She checked the time, 9:45 p.m. If Marcus was working late, he wouldn't be home yet. "Good, I'll wait for him," she muttered, stepping out of her car. She walked up to the front door. She was thinking about whether to call him again, but something didn't sit right with her. The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. "I need to know if he's really working," she whispered to herself. She reached for the door handle. It turned easily. Unlocked. Why was the door open if he wasn't home? She pushed it open and stepped inside. The house was quiet. The air was still. But then, a faint laugh. A woman's voice. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heels barely made a sound as she walked deeper into the house. The living room was empty, but the soft glow of a side lamp shone from beneath the door to Marcus's bedroom. Isabella's heart raced as she reached for the door handle. And then she heard it. A giggle. A woman's voice, teasing. "Marcus, stop it." A man's low chuckle. "Come here, baby." Everything went numb. Isabella threw the door open. The scene before her crushed her soul into a million pieces. Marcus, her Marcus, was lying in bed with another woman. His arm was wrapped around her. Their bodies were tangled in the sheets. The woman, someone Isabella didn't recognize, gasped and grabbed the covers, pulling them up to her chest. Marcus sat up quickly. His face went pale with shock. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" Isabella felt her entire world shatter. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. She couldn't even scream. Her fingers curled into fists. She had defended him. She had planned a future with him. She had lied to her father for him. And this was how she repaid her? "So this is why you were working late?" Her voice came out in a whisper, thick with disbelief. Marcus ran a hand over his face, trying to find words. "Isabella, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" Isabella exploded. Her voice was shaking with rage. "You're in bed with another woman, Marcus. How much clearer can it be?" The woman beside him shrank back, clearly wanting to disappear. Marcus tried to get out of bed, but Isabella took a step back. She was disgusted. Don't even try," she said coldly. She didn't want to hear his excuses. She didn't want to hear anything. Without another word, she turned and stormed out. She barely heard Marcus calling after her. She didn't care. She was done. She practically ran to her car. Her hands were shaking as she opened the door. She threw herself into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. Her breathing was fast and heavy. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her father was expecting to meet her boyfriend tomorrow. Her boyfriend had just betrayed her in the worst way possible. She had no one. She gritted her teeth and turned on the car engine. "I need to get out of here," she muttered. She drove blindly through the city streets. Her mind was spinning. Her father's words kept playing in her head. "Bring him home. I want to meet him." But there was no one to bring. Isabella wiped a hand over her face, letting out a shaky breath. She needed a plan. And then, as she passed a dark street, she saw them. A small group of homeless men sitting under an old bridge. They were laughing and talking as if they had no cares in the world. That was when the idea hit her. If she couldn't bring her real boyfriend home, she would hire one. Isabella's hands tightened around the steering wheel as she pulled over near a dark alley. Her mind was racing, but one thought kept repeating itself. She needed a solution, and she needed it fast. It was risky. It was crazy, but she had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of her car and walked toward them. As soon as they noticed her, their heads turned in curiosity. A young, well-dressed woman walking toward them at night? It was unexpected. A few of the men immediately stood up, eager to get her attention. "Miss, please, anything will help," one of them begged, reaching out his hand. "God bless you, beautiful lady," another added. Isabella barely noticed them. Her eyes were locked on one man. He was sitting away from the others, wearing a black hoodie. His face was partly hidden under the shadow of the bridge. His beard was messy, his clothes were worn out, but there was something different about him. Unlike the others, he wasn't begging for anything. He just sat there, watching her with a calm but distant look. "Him," Isabella said, pointing at him. The other men turned to look at him, then back at her in confusion. "Me?" he finally spoke. His voice was rough but steady. "Yes, you," Isabella said, stepping closer. He let out a short, dry laugh and shook his head. "Look, rich lady, if you're here to save a homeless man, try someone else. I'm not interested." Isabella clenched her jaw. "That's none of your business. All you need to know is that I'm willing to pay handsomely." Dante smirked, shaking his head. "Lady, you must be really desperate."
"Are you interested or not?" Isabella snapped. Dante exhaled, rubbing his beard. "No offense, but I don't do charity cases." Isabella tilted her head. "Who said I was doing charity? I'm offering you money. A lot of it." Dante gave her a long, hard look. Then he shrugged. Nah, I don't need your money. Isabella's frustration boiled over. Fine, she said, pulling out her phone. She turned to one of the other men, pretending to be interested in him. But before she could speak, Dante suddenly sighed. Wait, he muttered. Isabella turned back to him, raising an eyebrow. Dante exhaled again, then glanced at the other men, the ones who needed the money. Some were shivering in the cold. Others looked like they hadn't eaten in days. After a long pause, he finally said, If you really want me to do this, give the money to them. Isabella blinked in surprise. What? You heard me, Dante said. Give it to them, not me. If you do that, then I'll go with you. The other homeless men stared at him in shock. Dante, are you crazy? That's your money, one of them shouted. You want to waste this chance? Another asked. But Dante just stood up, stretching his arms like this whole conversation was exhausting. I don't need a rich girl's money, but they do. Isabella was still stunned. Who was this guy? She studied him for a moment. Then, without another word, she pulled out a bundle of cash from her bag and handed it to the other homeless men. Then she turned back to him. It's done. Now let's go. Dante stared at her for a second, then let out a small chuckle. Well, this should be interesting, he muttered, grabbing his old backpack. Let's see what a spoiled rich girl's problems look like up close. And with that, he followed her into the night. Isabella drove in silence, glancing at Dante from the corner of her eye. He sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, looking completely unbothered, as if this was just another regular day in his life. His black hoodie was pulled over his head, but it did nothing to hide his rough beard, tired eyes, and the worn-out state of his clothes. He smelled of sweat, dust, and the city streets. He didn't fit into her world, and he knew it. But soon, that would change. Isabella exhaled, gripping the steering wheel tighter. She was really doing this. Where are we going? Dante finally asked, breaking the silence. A friend's place, Isabella replied shortly. He raised an eyebrow. Not your house? Afraid your rich parents might call security on me? Isabella shot him a glare. I need you cleaned up first. My parents might be strict, but they're not stupid. If you walk into my house looking like this, they'll know something is wrong immediately. Dante smirked. Fair enough. 20 minutes later, Isabella pulled up in front of a modern, well-furnished apartment complex. This is where your friend lives? Dante asked as he stepped out, stretching. Yes, Isabella said, leading the way. She's a professional makeup artist. She's the only one I trust to fix this situation. Dante let out a low chuckle. Wow, I'm a situation now. Isabella ignored him and rang the doorbell. Seconds later, the door swung open, revealing Sophia Chen, her longtime friend and one of the best makeup artists in the city. Sophia's eyes widened in shock as she took in Dante's appearance. Her expression quickly turned from confusion to disgust. Isabella, what is this? Sophia asked, arms crossed. Isabella, meet Dante. Dante, meet Sophia. Dante gave a lazy, two-fingered salute. Hey, Sophia wrinkled her nose. Isabella, tell me this is a joke. Who is this person? Why does he look like he just crawled out of a dumpster? Dante burst into laughter. Wow, straight to the insults. No warm welcome? Sophia narrowed her eyes. I'm serious, Isabella. What are you doing bringing a homeless man here? Isabella crossed her arms. He's my fiancé. Silence. Then Sophia laughed so hard she had to hold on to the doorframe for support. Dante smirked. Glad someone finds this funny. Sophia wiped tears from her eyes. Isabella, you know you're under pressure from your parents, but this is your big plan? A homeless guy? You've officially lost it. Isabella's jaw clenched. I don't need your judgment, Sophia. I need your help. Sophia scoffed. Help with what? Making him look less like someone who sleeps under a bridge? Yes, Isabella said firmly. You're a makeup artist. You know style. You know image. I need you to make him look like someone my parents would approve of. Sophia stared at her like she had grown two heads. You're really serious about this, aren't you? She muttered. Isabella nodded. Sophia sighed dramatically and leaned against the door. You know what? Fine. You're my best friend, and you've always helped me when I needed you, so I'll do this, but I still think you're insane. Dante clapped his hands together. Great, glad we're all on board.
Sophia rolled her eyes. "Don't get comfortable, street boy. This is temporary. I don't want my neighbors thinking I've taken in a charity case." Dante smirked. "No worries, rich girl. I wouldn't want anyone thinking I actually enjoy being here either." Isabella groaned. This was going to be a long night.
The next day, Dante woke up on the couch at Sophia's house. He was ready. Sophia shoved him into the bathroom, tossing in a bag of grooming supplies. "If you don't come out looking like a different person, don't bother coming out at all," she had warned. When he finally came out, freshly showered, shaved, and wearing clean clothes, Isabella couldn't stop staring at him. For a few seconds, she just stood frozen, unable to look away. She had to admit it to herself. He was very handsome, not at all like the homeless man she had picked off the street. His thick, messy beard was gone, replaced with a well-groomed stubble. His hair was no longer a tangled mess, but cut and styled. And underneath all of that dirt and roughness, he was strikingly good-looking. She quickly shook herself out of it, forcing herself to focus. Sophia, however, whistled. "Well, well, who knew there was a decent face under all that filth?" Dante smirked. "Glad you approve?" "Don't push it," Sophia snapped, but she couldn't hide her slight smile. The final step was his wardrobe. Sophia threw designer clothes at him, making him try on different suits, shirts, and shoes until he finally looked the part. When he stepped in front of the mirror, even Dante had to pause. He looked different, like someone who belonged in Isabella's world. Isabella studied him carefully, arms crossed. "Not bad. Now you actually look like someone my father won't throw out immediately." Dante turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Do I?" There was something in his tone that made Isabella hesitate. She opened her mouth to reply, but Sophia clapped her hands together. "All right, lovebirds, he looks decent enough. Now can I get some sleep?" Isabella sighed. "Yes, thank you, Sophia." Sophia gave her a tired look. "Don't thank me yet. This is only the beginning. I hope you know what you're doing." Isabella glanced at Dante, who was still staring at his reflection. "So do I," she thought. Isabella's heart pounded as she pulled up to the Romano mansion. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. The house, a massive estate with marble pillars and a sprawling garden, loomed in front of them. Dante, sitting beside her, let out a low whistle. "So this is your house," he muttered. Isabella didn't reply. She was too busy mentally preparing for what was about to happen. This wasn't a simple introduction. This was a test. She turned to Dante. "Listen, my father is sharp. He doesn't tolerate nonsense, and if he senses anything off, this whole thing will fall apart. So whatever you do, be convincing." "Relax, princess. I clean up well, remember?" Isabella shot him a glare before stepping out of the car. As they walked up the grand entrance, the huge doors swang open to reveal Mr. Carlos Romano standing tall in his crisp suit. His sharp eyes immediately landed on Dante. For a few long seconds, he stared at Dante with a sharp gaze. "Have we met before?" Mr. Romano asked, tilting his head slightly. Isabella felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. Dante, however, remained calm. He simply smiled and extended his hand. "I don't believe we have, sir, but I've heard a lot about you." Mr. Romano shook his hand, but his look of recognition didn't disappear. His piercing gaze studied Dante for a moment longer before he finally nodded. All right, let's eat." The family dinner was awkward from the start. Dante sat beside Isabella at the long dining table. His posture was perfect, his charm was effortless. He answered questions smoothly, never showing any cracks in the story Isabella had created for him. But while Mr. Romano seemed content enough, Mrs. Elena Romano was a different case entirely. She never took her eyes off Dante. Barely ate, barely spoke, just watched. Finally, she set down her fork and leaned forward. "So, Dante, where exactly did you and Isabella meet?" she asked. Her voice was sweet, but sharp. Dante smiled. "We met at a charity event. She was volunteering, and I happened to be there as well. We just clicked." Isabella internally sighed in relief. They had rehearsed that answer. Mrs. Romano, however, didn't seem satisfied. "Interesting," she murmured. Then came the next voice. "Or is it something else?" Isabella closed her eyes briefly before turning to face her cousin, Bianca, who sat across from them with a fake smile. Of course Bianca would try to cause trouble. Bianca had always been jealous of Isabella. The competition between them had existed since childhood. Who wore the best clothes, who had the best grades, who had the richest boyfriend. And now Bianca was determined to prove that Dante wasn't who he claimed to be. "I mean, let's be honest," Dante continued, twirling her fork in her fingers. "A man like you, Dante, I don't recall ever seeing you at any of the charity events Isabella attends." Dante simply smiled. "Perhaps you were too busy admiring yourself to notice me." Bianca's smirk vanished instantly. Mr. Romano let out a chuckle. "I like him," he said, cutting a piece of steak. Bianca, humiliated, glared at Dante, but he just kept eating as if her opinions didn't matter. But while Bianca was throwing daggers at Dante, Mrs. Romano remained deep in thought. Isabella could tell her mother wasn't done yet. That night, after dinner, Mrs. Romano sat in her private study. Her fingers were tapping against the desk. "I know I've seen that man before," she muttered to herself. Bianca sat across from her, arms crossed. "I don't buy it, Aunt Elena. That man isn't who he says he is. I can feel it." Mrs. Romano nodded slowly. "I need you to find out everything you can about him." Bianca's eyes lit up with excitement. "Leave it to me." The plan was simple. They would dig into Dante's past. If he was lying, they would find out.
And if they did, Isabella wouldn't know what hit her. Meanwhile, Isabella walked Dante to the guest room where he would be staying for the night. "You handled yourself well," she admitted as they reached the door. "I told you I could play the part," Dante replied. Isabella hesitated, then cleared her throat. "Good, because my mother is already suspicious, and Bianca, she won't stop until she finds something." Dante's smirk faded slightly. "So I guess that means I need to be extra careful." Isabella nodded. There was a brief pause, too long, too noticeable. For the first time since this arrangement started, Isabella felt something different, a warmth between them, a silent understanding. She quickly shook it off. "Good night, Dante." "Good night, Isabella." She walked away quickly, not wanting to think too much about how her heart had started beating faster. Mrs. Elena Romano sat in her study. Her fingers were tapping on the wooden desk. Across from her, Bianca was scrolling through her phone. She was trying to dig up anything useful about Dante. "I don't trust that man," Mrs. Romano said quietly. "Something about him feels off." Bianca smirked. "Of course it does. He's pretending to be Isabella's fiancé, and we both know she didn't just find him at some charity event." Mrs. Romano narrowed her eyes. "Then we need to prove it." Bianca sat up straighter, her eyes gleaming. "I already started looking into his name. I made a few calls." Mrs. Romano leaned forward. "And?" Bianca frowned. "There's barely anything about him in recent records. It's almost like he disappeared for a long time." Mrs. Romano tapped her chin thoughtfully. "If we can't find out much about him, we'll go a different route. We'll find someone who might know him." She picked up her phone and made a call to a private investigator. "Find everything you can about a man named Dante Moretti, his education, his family, his past. I need answers immediately." Later that evening, as the family gathered for tea in the Romano Mansion's Grand Lounge, the private investigator's report came in. Bianca grinned as she looked at the document on her phone. "I knew it. Dante is not who he claims to be." Mrs. Romano took the phone from her and read the details. "His father's name was Antonio Moretti," she read aloud, frowning. At that moment, Mr. Carlos Romano, who had been quietly reading a newspaper, suddenly froze. He slowly lowered the paper. His sharp eyes locked onto his wife. "What did you just say?" he asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Mrs. Romano blinked in confusion. Dante's full name is Dante Moretti. His father's name was Antonio Moretti. Mr. Romano's jaw clenched. For the first time that evening, he looked genuinely shaken. "You said Antonio Moretti?" he repeated. Isabella, who had been sitting beside Dante, noticed the sudden tension in her father's face. "Dad, what is it?" Mr. Romano slowly turned his gaze to Dante. "Your father's name was Antonio Moretti?" he asked. Dante, who had been watching everything unfold, nodded cautiously. "Yes, he passed away years ago." Mr. Romano let out a slow breath, rubbing his chin. His entire demeanor had shifted. "I knew that name sounded familiar," he muttered. He stood up, walking towards the large family portrait wall at the far end of the lounge. Among the framed pictures of business meetings and partnerships, there was one particular photo, a black and white picture of a younger Mr. Romano in a security uniform, standing next to a tall, serious-looking man. He pointed at the man in the picture. "That's your father," he said, turning to Dante. Dante stood up quickly, his eyes widened in shock. "You knew my father?" he asked. Mr. Romano nodded. His expression softened in a way no one had ever seen before. "I didn't just know him, I respected him. He was a good man, honest, hard-working. I never met Dante because back then he was studying abroad, but I remember seeing his father's sitting room. There was always a framed picture of his son Dante on the shelf. I recognize the face now."
Dante swallowed hard. He had spent years feeling abandoned, believing his father had no real connections in the business world. Yet here he was, listening to the truth. His father had been the reason for one of the wealthiest men in the country's success. "Your father would be proud of you," Mr. Romano said quietly. Mrs. Romano and Bianca sat completely speechless. Their attempt to expose Dante as a fraud had done the exact opposite. It had proven that he was more connected to this family than they ever expected. Isabella turned to her mother. Her eyes were sharp with defiance. "Still think he's lying?" she asked. Mrs. Romano said nothing. Bianca looked away, humiliated. But Dante wasn't sure how to feel. This revelation had changed everything. The room was still. No one spoke. Dante took a deep breath. "You said you knew my father," Dante said slowly. "But if that's true, why didn't you ever look for him?" Mr. Romano sighed, rubbing his forehead as if the memory pained him. "I did," I admitted. "I went back to your father's house many times after I tried to reach him, to no avail. I wanted to thank him, to help him in any way I could. But he was gone." Dante's heart dropped. "Gone?" "Yes," Mr. Romano continued. "I tried calling, but his phone was off. I assumed he had moved abroad. Many people do when they want a fresh start. But I had no idea. No one told me what really happened to him." Dante let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "He didn't move abroad, Mr. Romano. He didn't leave for a fresh start. He lost everything." Mrs. Romano and Bianca exchanged a look. They could sense the sudden heaviness in the room. Isabella held her breath, waiting for Dante to continue. He looked up. His eyes were sharp and filled with an anger that had been buried for years. "My father was betrayed." His voice was low but firm. Mr. Romano frowned. "What do you mean?" Dante exhaled sharply. "It was his best friend," he said. His jaw was tightening. "Mr. Frank Capelli, his business partner. My father trusted him like a brother. They built everything together. But Frank, he wanted it all.
He used my father's trust against him, made him sign off important company shares, and before my father knew it, he had nothing left. Mr. Romano's eyes darkened. Frank? Frank Capelli? He asked, almost as if he didn't want to believe it. Dante nodded slowly. Yes, that's the one. Mr. Romano's hands curled into fists. He had done business with Frank Capelli in the past. He had always sensed something off about him, but never questioned it too deeply. Now he wished he had. I had no idea, Mr. Romano said, shaking his head in regret. Your father never reached out to me. Dante smiled bitterly. If you know my father well, you should know he isn't one to call in such favors, he said, his voice laced with pain. Do you think a man who had just lost his entire life's work to someone he trusted could start calling old friends for favors? He was ashamed, Mr. Romano. The man who once helped people rise had fallen. He didn't want pity. Mrs. Romano and Bianca looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Isabella, however, was staring at Dante. She was seeing a depth of pain she had never noticed before. What happened to him? Mr. Romano asked, softly. Dante's throat tightened, but he forced himself to speak. After Frank took everything, my father's health started failing. It wasn't just the loss of money, it was the betrayal, the stress, the humiliation. We used our last savings to fly him abroad for treatment, hoping the change of environment would help. A long pause. Then, in a voice so quiet as it was almost a whisper, Dante said, "But it didn't. He never recovered. The pain of betrayal killed him more than the illness itself." Isabella felt her chest tighten. Mr. Romano looked completely shaken. His shoulders slumped as if a great weight had been just placed on them. I didn't know," he whispered. "If I had known, I would have helped. Your father did so much for me. I never forgot him." Dante let out a slow, shaky breath. "But you didn't know, and by the time anyone cared to find out, it was too late." Silence, a thick, heavy silence. For the first time, Mrs. Romano looked down, as if she too felt guilty. Bianca's usual arrogance was gone. Isabella gritted her teeth to stop the sudden sting of tears in her eyes. This wasn't just some fake engagement anymore. This wasn't just a plan to escape marriage pressure. This was so much bigger than her. She turned to Dante, wanting to say something, anything, but he was already getting up from his seat. "If you'll excuse me," Dante said calmly, but there was something cold in his voice. "I need some air." Without waiting for anyone's response, he walked out of the room. Isabella watched him go. She felt a strange ache in her chest. She had brought him into this world as a lie, but now she was starting to see the real Dante Moretti, and something told her she wasn't ready for what that meant. Dante stood outside on the grand balcony of the Romano estate. He let the cool night air wash over him. He took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the evening settle in his chest. For years he had believed his father had died forgotten, his name erased from history. But tonight he had learned the truth. His father had changed a man's life, and not just any man, Mr. Carlos Romano, one of the wealthiest and most influential people in the country. "Your father would be proud of you," Mr. Romano said, his voice softer than before. Dante straightened, nodding respectfully. "Sir?" Mr. Romano sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I still can't believe it. All these years I searched for your father. I wanted to at least thank him, but I thought he had left the country. If I had known he was struggling, I would have done everything in my power to help." Dante offered a small smile, shaking his head. "I know that, sir, and I don't blame you. Life took us in different directions." Mr. Romano turned to face him fully. His gaze was filled with regret and sincerity. "Let me make it right, Dante. I owe everything to your father. Let me help you now. I can set you up in business, give you a fresh start." Dante exhaled slowly. He looked out over the garden before turning back to him. "I appreciate that, sir, more than you know," he said sincerely. "But my father raised me to be independent, to build something with my own hands. If I take your help now, I'll always wonder if I could have done it alone." Mr. Romano studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed with a small smile. "You're just like your father," he said with a chuckle, "stubborn and full of pride." Dante laughed lightly, nodding. "Maybe, but I also know that if I fail, I'll find my way back up." Mr. Romano placed a hand on Dante's shoulder. "You will succeed, Dante. I have no doubt about it." Standing in the doorway, Isabella had been listening to their conversation. Her chest was tightening. Dante wasn't angry or bitter, he was simply determined. And for some reason, that made her respect him more than ever. As Dante turned to leave, she stepped forward quickly. "Dante, wait," she called.
He stopped, turning to face her. "You don't have to go," she said. Her voice was softer now. Dante smiled. "I do, Isabella." She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "You're walking away from a huge opportunity," she said carefully. Dante nodded. "I know, but I have to build my own path. I don't want to live depending on your father's kindness. I want to make something of myself, the way he did." Isabella hesitated. "Where will you go, Dante?" Dante shrugged. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." He took a step toward her and smiled. "Thank you, Isabella, for everything." For a moment, Isabella didn't know what to say. This was just supposed to be a fake engagement, a business arrangement, but now she was watching a man she had come to admire walk away, and for the first time, she didn't want him to. "Take care of yourself, Dante," she finally said. "You too, Isabella," he replied, before turning and walking out of the Romano estate. Isabella watched him disappear into the night. Her hands were trembling slightly. And in that moment, she realized something she never expected. She wasn't just losing a fake fiancé, she was losing someone who would become real to her. A few days later, Isabella sat in her room. She was staring out of the large glass window that overlooked the garden. The estate was quiet, yet her mind was far from peaceful. It had been days since Dante walked away, and yet she couldn't stop thinking about him. She had spent so much time seeing him as just part of her plan, her way out of an arranged marriage, but now she saw him differently. She saw a man who had lost everything but still held on to his dignity. A man who could have easily taken her father's offer, but instead chose to stand on his own feet. A man who was strong, honest, and determined. And for the first time, she admitted it to herself. She had feelings for him. Real ones. Isabella let out a frustrated sigh and leaned back against the chair. "What is wrong with me?" she whispered to herself. "Why do I care this much?" The answer was clear, but she wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. Meanwhile, Dante had been busy building his future. After leaving the Romano estate, he spent the next few days reaching out to old contacts, people he had submitted his business proposals to. And then, finally, luck came knocking. A group of investors, impressed by his knowledge and qualifications, offered him a business deal, a startup project that would put him back in the game. With their support, Dante was able to restart his life. He wasn't a billionaire, he wasn't living in a mansion, but he had a fresh start, and for now, that was enough. On the other side of town, no matter how hard Isabella tried to focus on her daily life, her thoughts always drifted back to Dante. She told herself it was just curiosity, that she just wanted to know if he was doing okay, but deep down, she knew the truth. She missed him, and she needed to see him again. So she did something she'd never think she'd do. She went looking for him. She asked around, made a few calls, even checked where she had first met him. Then finally, she found him.
Isabella stood outside a small but elegant boutique. Her heart was pounding. Through the glass window, she could see Dante inside. He was browsing through a rack of freshly pressed shirts. He looked different. Still the same Dante, but more refined, more confident. She watched as he spoke with the shop owner, smiling, relaxed, at peace. And suddenly, she knew exactly what she had to do. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and walked inside. Dante turned to the sound of the doorbell, his eyebrows raised in surprise when he saw her. Isabella. She walked up to him. Her chest was tight. Her emotions were threatening to spill over. "I've been looking for you," she admitted. Dante smirked slightly, folding his arms. "Why? Did your father send you?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "This has nothing to do with my father. This is about me." Dante tilted his head, intrigued. "Oh." Isabella took a deep breath. "I miss you, Dante." His small smile faded. His expression turned serious. "Isabella, let me finish," she interrupted, stepping closer. "At first, this was just a deal, a way to escape my parents' expectations, but somewhere along the way, I started to see you for who you really are." Dante's gaze softened, but he said nothing. "You're not just a man who lost everything. You're a man who never stopped fighting, a man who refused to take the easy way out, and I admire that. I admire you," she continued. She swallowed. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "I don't care if you're rich or homeless. I don't care if you have nothing or everything. I just want you." Dante blinked, clearly taken aback. For the first time, he didn't have a witty comeback. He simply stared at her as if trying to figure out if this was real. And then he smiled, a genuine, real smile. "You're serious, aren't you?" he asked. Isabella nodded. Her heart was racing. "Yes, I am." Dante let out a small chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, this is unexpected," he admitted. "Is it?" Isabella asked softly. He met her gaze. His eyes were searching hers. Then slowly, he reached for her hand. "Maybe not," he murmured. And just like that, the world around them faded. There were no fake deals, no lies, no plans, just the truth. And for the first time, it was enough. A few days later, Dante sat across from Mr. Carlos Romano in his home office. His posture was relaxed, but his voice was firm. "I wanted to personally tell you about my new business deal," Dante said with a proud smile. "I've partnered with some investors who believe in my vision, and we're starting a company together." Mr. Romano leaned back in his chair. His eyes were filled with pride. "That's incredible, Dante," he said, nodding. "I knew you'd make it on your own. You remind me so much of your father, determined, resilient, and never afraid of hard work." Dante chuckled. "I like to think he'd be proud."
Mr. Romano smiled warmly. He would be, and so am I. For the first time, Dante felt truly accepted. As Dante left the office, he was surprised to see Mrs. Elena Romano standing in the hallway. Her usual stern expression was replaced with something softer. For a moment, she said nothing, just studying him carefully. Then, finally, she sighed and looked away, as if struggling to find the right words. "Dante," she said slowly, I owe you an apology." Dante raised an eyebrow, folding his arms. "Oh?" She let out a small breath. "I was wrong about you. I judged you without knowing your story, without realizing who you truly are. And now, knowing everything, knowing that the life of comfort I've enjoyed was made possible because of your father's kindness, I feel ashamed." She met his gaze. Her eyes were filled with something Dante had never seen in them before: sincerity. "I'm sorry, Dante," she said quietly. "I misjudged you, and I hope, in time, you can forgive me." Dante watched her carefully, trying to gauge whether her words were genuine. but as he looked into her eyes, he saw the truth. This wasn't the proud, dismissive woman who had once looked down on him. This was a woman who had finally realized the depth of her own mistakes. Dante nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am," he said simply. "That means a lot." Mrs. Romano let out a relieved breath, then gave him a small nod before walking away. And just like that, another chapter of his past was finally closed. That evening, Dante found himself standing in the garden of the Romano estate. He was watching Isabella as she laughed with Sophia and a few friends. He smiled to himself. It was crazy to think how this all started, a fake engagement, a desperate plan to escape an arranged marriage. But now he couldn't imagine his life without her. Dante took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Isabella?" he called. She turned. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Dante, come join us!" But then she paused, noticing the serious look on his face. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. Dante reached into his pocket, and before Isabella could process what was happening, he slowly dropped to one knee. Gasps echoed around them. Isabella froze. Her eyes widened. "Dante," she whispered. Her heart was racing. He took her hand in his. His eyes were filled with nothing but love and certainty. "Isabella," he said softly, "when we started, everything was a lie. But somewhere along the way, I found something real. You. You saw me when no one else did. You stood by me, even when you didn't have to, and you made me believe in love again." A tear slipped down Isabella's cheek, but she said nothing. She was too overwhelmed. Dante smiled. "I don't care where I started. I don't care about my past. All I know is that I want my future to be with you." He pulled out a simple but elegant ring and held it up. "Isabella Romano, will you marry me for real this time?" Isabella let out a shaky breath, then broke into a wide, teary smile. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Dante grinned, slipping the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. Cheers and applause erupted around them, but at that moment, nothing else mattered. All that mattered was them, their love, their new beginning. Months later, Dante and Isabella stood before their family and friends. They were exchanging vows in a beautiful and intimate wedding ceremony. Dante was no longer just the homeless man Isabella picked off the street. He was now a respected businessman who had earned his place in the world through hard work and resilience. Isabella was no longer just a trillionaire heiress forced into marriage. She was now a woman who had followed her heart and found true love. And as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, they knew their story was only just beginning.